started for our webinar here. So this is our webinar for authors, for aspiring authors, Authors Workshop, and it's brought to you by iConnect Texas. This is an initiative for the community, and all of our events are free, so we hope that you enjoy this workshop. So I want to just go ahead and start by going over a couple of things. If you are joining us as a guest, we will not be able to see your video, but you are welcome to use the chat feature and also the question and answers feature. So if you have a question for one of our panelists or our speaker, Liz Evans, just go ahead and use either the question and answer or the chat, and I will go ahead and ask that question for you, okay? The other thing is, if you are a panelist, remember to mute your mic if you're not speaking currently. And also, if you can just go ahead and mute your phone, which I'm going to do right now as well. And that way we don't get interrupted. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So our first speaker is Liz Evans, and she's going to go ahead and speak for about 15 minutes with us. And then we'll have about a 5-minute question and answer. So once she's done going over the basics of how to get the book started, then we're going to do a quick question and answer, and then we'll jump right into our panelists, and we have some questions for our panelists. So that's exciting. You're going to get to hear from each one of our authors. We will introduce them right before the panel discussion, and then you can also ask some questions at the end of that panel discussion. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce Liz Evans. Liz,
hello, everyone.
There she is. So let me tell you a little bit about Liz. She's actually, for over 20 years, she's worked in the management level of large firms, so she's an executive. During her tenure, she's personally witnessed and experienced bullying in schools, in the workplace, with families, friends, and relationships. So after much thought and prayer, she has been inspired to speak out against bullying and be a anti-bullying advocate. And so that has led her to write several books. She's written 2 books, and she's working on her 3rd one, right, Liz?
Yes.
Great. And so if you want to connect with Liz, you can definitely connect with her directly, Liz Evans, and also her link is on iConnect Texas. So you can go to her profile there on our page, and you can connect with her directly. So Liz, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us and inspiring these authors to go ahead and take that next step to writing a book.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, and I really feel honored to be a part of this, so thank you very much. And I have my bullet point notes, so I'll be going off of those, making sure I don't miss anything on how to write a book. And writing a book is one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do. You have the ability to reach thousands and millions of people in helping them. And have you ever heard of, I get asked this a lot, how do you know what to write? Do you ever get writer's block? Have you ever heard the term writer's block? Yes. So I think we all authors know we get writer's block. So I call it when your imaginary friends refuse to talk to you. And that's supposed to be funny. And sometimes it can be difficult coming up with ideas. So there's going to be times you're going to want to quit writing. Don't quit writing. You can take a break. Ideas will come to you. You're writing book because your creative imagination is no longer working. So that's why you get writer's block too. But once again, we all get those writer's block. Don't give up. It's like a brain freeze. If you've ever heard of a brain freeze, like eating cold ice cream. And so the steps of writing a book is, first, step 1 is pick a mentor. So my mentor is Cedric Crawford. He has several books out. So Cedric has been my mentor from the beginning, and he helped me along the process of writing books and how to get them published. And the role of a mentor are the 3 C's of mentorship: is consultant, counselor, and your cheerleader, because we want to be your biggest cheerleader. I know Cedric was for me. There's times I wanted to give up, and He's like, no, we all get the writer's block, keep writing. Sometimes you get lost in your writing, you don't know the next steps. That's where you want to reach out to your mentor once again. And then your step 2 is picking a topic. So whether it's finding what character you want to write about, if it's going to be science fiction, if it's going to be poetry, short stories like mine, also self-help like mine. You can write on comedy, whatever it is, go ahead and pick your character, what you want to do with writing your book. And then your step 4 is it's time to make your outline. So you don't have to have all the chapters in order in the beginning. What I do is I start writing, and eventually it all comes together, and then you can start putting your chapters in order as you're writing, and it starts just forming really nicely. And then your step 5 is start writing, even if you don't have the exact chapters in place. And you also want to, on the step 6, you'll want to start thinking about the title of your book. Sometimes you don't have a title at the beginning of your book, and that's okay. It'll come as you start writing your book. I see Tracy shaking her head, yes, so, and Caitlyn. And just start writing, your title of the book will come. And then step 7, as you're writing, you want to start calling yourself a writer, because now you're a writer. You're not a published author yet, but you are a writer. Okay, and so it's easy to get distracted from writing, and once you break the writing mode you're in, it's hard to get back. So what I do when I'm writing, I turn off the TV, I turn off electronics, I put my phone away. I could write then for 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Before you know it, that time goes by so fast that you have written not only just pages, but chapters in a book. And one of the things that we do is if you were to write one piece of paper, one chapter a day, then you have your book within just a matter of time. Also, if you keep a journal, that's a really great way of knowing you want to be a writer. I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer till later on in life. And so start keeping your journal. My other computer here keeps freezing up on me. And then the great thing about being a writer is you can write from anywhere. Sometimes I write from my office. Sometimes if I get writer's block, I go to a harbor, maybe at the lake or the beach, or I may find a winery, just somewhere where you're going to get that inspiration. There's a cross in, it's called Grant Park in Ventura, California, that I get a lot of inspiration. I wrote my dad a poem, my deceased dad, a poem on at that park, just because the scenery, it really helps you. So you want to go anywhere that's going to inspire you to write. So in the book, what you're going to find at the beginning of the book, I'm going to use Cedric's for example. You want to start, oh, I don't think you can see it. You want to make a headline, and you can write a description. I don't know if you can see it. I'll go ahead and let me scroll here. And like I said, my computer keeps freezing up. So this is where you're going to put the title of your page, your dedication, your acknowledgments, your table of contents, your preface or introduction, and then your book is coming together. And then you're going to want to think, as you're finishing your book, how you want to publish it. So there's two different types of publishing. One is the traditional publishing, and the other is self-publishing. And if you do the traditional publishing, then you pay for everything. You pay from editing, proofreading, typesetting, printing, binding, the cover art, the design, the promotion, the advertising, all of it. If you decide that you want to self-publish, then everything's on you. You're the publisher, you're the financer, and you're the decision maker, and you get the royalties from your book. So there's those two types of publishing, just depending on which one. And I'm sure one of the other authors are going to get into that also. So now it's time to format your book. And you think, okay, how do I know what size to pick? So if you can see mine here, mine's a smaller book compared to Cedric's. So you want to determine how many pages that you have in your book, and you can go with the size. So you'll want to know the size of your book, how many pages. I went through CreateSpace, I got my ISBN number, and which is on just about every back of the book. And then an ISBN number, product identifier, and that's why you want an ISBN number. So does anyone have any questions so far?
I don't see any questions here on, but I just, you made a great point, because this is something that maybe new authors don't know. So the ISBN number, it's actually a way to track the sales of your book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. And so a lot of us have seen where authors have, bestseller, right? And different things, bestseller on Amazon for the month or for the year or whatnot. And so that's actually how they track it. And so it's a great point that Liz made is, some of these things, will be new to you, but we don't want that to hinder you because you're going to be learning as you're going along. And so, taking those first steps, I think is going to help you kind of discover some of these things. Liz, where did you go besides your mentor? Where did you go to find out some of this information?
I did a lot of researching on the internet. So I knew how to research and find out information. And I went to my mentor when I needed to, as far as when it finally come together, as far as how do I get the pages, the chapters in order, how do I know the size of my book. That's when I went to my mentor the most. And that's where he helped me because he published through CreateSpace.
Okay, and that's another publishing. And I know that there's some other authors who have gone through Amazon to do self-publishing, things like that.
Yeah, Amazon owns CreateSpace.
Oh, okay. See, yeah. Something I didn't know. Learn something new.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let me, there is a question here, so let me go ahead and read it here. It says, do you also do audiobooks for all of your titles?
I haven't, but I'm going to start that because that's been a huge request, because people traveling now and they want to listen to audiobooks. So that is coming in the near future. Great question.
So how does one do an audiobook? Do you record your own audio and publish that somewhere?
You can do your own, or you can hire someone to go ahead and do the speaking for you in the audiobook. Okay,
that makes a lot of sense. So wonderful. So let me see if there's any other questions here. It looks like we might have one other question. Oh no, that was the one.
Okay. And one of the things also is when I finished my book, I wasn't quite sure how to put it in format. So what I did is I researched, and then I also listened to my mentor who he went through, and I went through Upwork. And you say, I want to pay someone this amount of money to proofread my book, and people start bidding on your book, usually from different countries. And you go, okay, you're hired to proofread my book, and you pay them a certain amount of money. And the same thing with editing. I design my front and back covers of the book, and so I didn't need anyone to do that. But if you need someone to do the design work for you, everything I've done is through Upwork.
Okay, so Upwork, and I know some other folks have used Fiverr. So
Yes.
there's a couple of different, you know, online resources where you can get something pretty reasonable. Just so that we can kind of have an idea, what would you say would be, if you want to self-publish, what would be a good, obviously you can do it with different resources, and so that shouldn't be a hindrance, right?
Right.
But if you want to start saving, what would be a good amount that you would say, a seed money, if you will?
You probably want about $500.
Okay.
And that is for your, now if you want someone to design the cover of your book, you want a little more, maybe $750. Mine was about $500 because that was for the proofreading, the editing of the book, the putting everything together and binding. That was getting my Isbn number through CreateSpace and ordering my first supply of books.
Wonderful. Okay, so that includes books. So that's actually a really good budget.
Yes, and what some people do is they will ask maybe a company to help sponsor them to get their books out.
Oh, that's a great idea. A sponsor. Yeah, and especially because you can write on just about anything that would relate to some type of a business.
Yes.
Well, that's a great advice. So we're about to go ahead and close up your session here, Liz. Is there any other information that you feel like you would be helpful to our aspiring authors?
Just pick up the paper, get on the computer, start writing. If you dream, get up throughout the night, write down your thoughts. You can only do a sentence or maybe a paragraph. You're going to remember it the next day. Just anything you have a moment. Now we all carry cell phones or iPads, and just start speaking into the notes, and that way you have it for later. And your book is just going to start forming once you start, because once you get that sentence or paragraph, you're just going to keep writing almost probably a whole chapter.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, and I think, you know, maybe one of the other things I would suggest is, you know, there's no right way to do this, right? Everybody kind of has their own way.
Every writer has their own way. Yes, and that's what's great, and that's why we come together, and it's like, okay, so how did you do this? And they will say what they did, and what worked for them may not work for someone else, but we're all in here to support each other.
I love it. And that's actually a great segue into our panelists. And so I just want to close with you, Liz, by saying thank you so much for your advice. And Liz she's out in the Dallas area. That's how I know Liz. I actually know Liz because we're both in real estate. So she's with Supreme Lending, and I'm just going to plug you really quick because that's actually how I know Liz. But she also does speaking engagements throughout the Metroplex. She's spoken at schools and done workshops for other organizations and things like that. So I invite you, if you are in the Metroplex, and she's a Cali girl like me. We're originally from Cali. So she's, I'm sure, just love to travel if you are somewhere else.
I love to travel, yes.
Outside of the Metroplex, you know, feel free to connect with Liz, and she'd be happy to come out and do a presentation with your organization or school. Well, thank you again, Liz, and we're going to give Liz a virtual round of applause.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. So if you all bear with me really quick here, I want to make an introduction to our panelists, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. That way you get to see our wonderful people, and you can get their names down right if you want to write them down and connect with them. So this is our special guest author, speaker, Liz Evans. And these are the books she's written: God's Purpose During the Heart of Our Storm, and let's see, God's Perseverance in the Heart of Our Storms. So there's two different ones, and I think she's working on a third one. So make sure you connect with Liz Evans, and that's the way you spell her name here. So our next author is going to be Chloe Stafford. And I'm super excited to have Chloe because I'm going to share with you guys, she is actually my niece. So I'm super excited to have her on here because I've just been watching her grow and be able to share with other people her age, you know, young people, and inspire them to actually write. And so she's spoken at other schools. She's out in the Orange County area in California. So if you're out there, feel free to reach out to Chloe. She does book readings, and she is working on a series. So her first book is Once Upon a Nothingness, and it's series. That's book 1. She's working on book 2, so we hope to hear that soon. I'm just going to read about her really quickly. She is 9 years old, and she wrote this book because she has a passion for reading and creativity and imagination. So in her free time, she also enjoys playing basketball, dancing, reading, writing stories, and coding. She hopes to one day be a pediatric surgeon and help children in need. So we hope that you connect with Chloe and order her book. It is on Amazon, and her link is also on our site at iConnect Texas. And so our next author is Daniel Garcia Ordaz, and he is an author from the South Texas area. And I had the pleasure of meeting Daniel when he did a TEDx talk up here in the Metroplex area. And I really enjoyed meeting him. He actually has a really neat name. He goes by the Poet Mariachi. And if you have a chance to YouTube him, he has a couple of speeches there on YouTube that you will definitely enjoy and be entertained with. So here's a couple of his books. I know that he also publishes, and so maybe he can tell us a little bit more about that. And you can see the 4 books here that are currently on his Amazon page, and his link again is on that Amazon. Let me read a little bit here about Daniel. So Daniel is a TEDx speaker. He goes by the Poet Mariachi. He's actually a Texas-based teacher and writer from McAllen. He is an established voice in the Mexican-American poetry community, and his work has been taught and written about by academics across the United States since 2018. He has been a Pushcart Prize nominee, and he has MFA in creative writing from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. So we are super excited to have him here because he is also an educator. So we're hoping that he will share his knowledge with us today. So our next author is Tracy Bloom. And Tracy has actually written several children's books. And so these are just a couple here. If you go again to our iConnect Texas page, there is a link to her website, and you can see all of the books she's written. I wish I could fit them all here, but I wasn't able to. So I just picked kind of the 4 that caught my eye. So let me read here about Tracy. Tracy is a self-published children's author. Her work is featured in bookstores from Oregon to Florida, including Powell City of Books, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Writer's Block, the Tampa Lowry Zoo. And all of her books come to her in the form of dreams, which I'm very excited to kind of hear about. And they carry a common theme. Love who you are, be kind to others, and do all that you can to make the world a better place. I love that quote, Tracy, and we're really excited to hear you speak about that. And so our other author here is Pamela Flint Knight, and I've known Pamela for quite some time. She's from Grand Prairie, and so she's a local here in the DFW area. And Pamela has written several books, but here's 4 of them that I was able to share with you all. And so Pamela has been writing for some time as well. And so she is currently, I believe, has a website that we can also visit. I put that on, it's on Amazon, and I did also link that there. So she's written a few books, Why Are We Here, which is the story about volunteers at a pregnancy center. She's written about the legendary locals of Grand Prairie. And she's actually written a couple of inspirational books, one in poetry and Living in the Fire, which, you know, talks about how to overcome some adversities. So thank you, Pamela, for being here. And our last but not least author is Katelynn Renteria. And Caitlyn is a millennial. So as you can see, we have a panel of multiple generations, and we really are excited about that because one of the things that we are encouraging folks to do is start your book, start your book regardless of age. And so you can see we have a millennial here she's actually been a teen author. She's currently in college, but she started writing when she was in her teens. So she is an award-winning author. She began her writing career when she published her first novel, The Other Side of the Law. She was only 16 years old, and she currently gives also presentations and workshops. And so we are excited to hear from her. And she also comes from South Texas. And I'm happy to have her here with us, and so that she can inspire our teen writers as well, to let them know that they can go ahead and take advantage of their abilities, and they don't have any limitations either. So without further ado, if you can go ahead and take your mic off here. I want to go ahead and start with the questions. And the way that we're going to go ahead and do this is that each author will go ahead and talk about, answer the question, and then we'll move into the next author. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull back up the questions here. Sorry, just give me one quick second. All right, here we go. Okay, so our first author is Miss Chloe Stafford. So Chloe, if you can take your mic off, and here's your question. So how long were you thinking about writing a book before you actually took the first step, and what was your first step?
It took me about 2 months, and then I started to draft and research.
Okay, so what was some of the research that you did during that time?
Some of the research was reading, and that would help me expand my book and get more ideas so I could keep going in it.
Okay, great. And so your first step when you decided, okay, I'm going to write this book, did you start writing with the intention to actually write and publish a book?
Yes. Well, at first I started like this was going to be a fun summer project. Then it became, I think this should actually become a real book. And then it was, I'm going to publish this book.
Okay, great. Okay, so then it was first just a project, and so you were just doing it because you love writing.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chloe. And so Daniel, same question to you. How long were you, quote unquote, thinking about writing the book, and what was your first step?
Thanks for having me. I love what Liz said earlier. If you want to be a writer, call yourself a writer, and that helps, because then people are like, oh, that guy's a writer. Then it puts a little bit of a good pressure on you to be a writer. So if you want to be a good runner, you got to run. If you want to be a good writer, you got to write. So I put together a chapbook. So it's just like I went to the corner store, or to the office supply store, and I made just regular copies, like about 20 pages of different poems that I would do like at open mics and stuff. And because people would be like, oh, my aunt would love a copy of that. And I was so like touched by that. I'm like, oh, here, free copies. But then after a while, it's like, wait, I'm like a broke college student. So I started selling, chapbook, something called a chapbook. So I also had like individual poems and essays published like in different magazines and journals. So once I had a few of those, then those pieces kind of together, I said, well, these pieces would work together as a collection. So whenever I figured it was time to, put a whole book together, I definitely had to research a lot. And I'm like, what's a dedication page? How to get an ISBN, all that, like Liz mentioned. So it took me, once I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this, it was probably at least a good 3 months of researching and then funding it and putting it together. One of the last steps was, just building the cover. So I had an idea, but I didn't have any graphic design skills. So I definitely had to hire someone, but it was all my, sort of ideas. So it worked out well.
Great. So that's really interesting. So it really started more as you just sharing your passion, and then it developed into, hey, what if I go ahead and put this together? Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, Daniel. So Katelynn, we're going to go ahead and go next to you. Same question. How long were you thinking about it, and what was your first step?
I spent my entire elementary, middle school career in love with writing and in love with reading. And it wasn't until the 5th grade that I, took up the courage and I enrolled in a writing competition and I got first place. And that was the big defining 5th grade moment. Life changed at 10 years old, where just, I can do this. I can write. I can keep going. So from then on, I guess that was the first step of starting to take writing much more seriously. It was no longer just a hobby for me. I wanted to see how can I get better? How can I keep improving? And when I was 14 years old and I started writing a manuscript, by the time when I finished it a year later at 15, it really did kind of open my eyes to, you know what, I have an actual book. I have something of substance here. And I really like what Chloe said, where, it just started as a project, because that's how it starts. I feel for a lot of us, it's just something on the side, But I think the first step is that courage of taking the leap and going to pursue it. So a lot of research went into what is traditional publishing, what is self-publishing, how can I get this out there, what's best for me right now. And it just all started with the love of reading and writing from a very young age, taking it seriously from the 5th grade on. And as a high schooler, having that courage of, you know what, let's go, let's pursue, let's keep going. And that's why it's absolutely wonderful to see students like Chloe, where it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter where you're at in the world. It doesn't matter what obstacles are in the way. You can get started today.
I love that, Katelynn. That's a really great, story. And I'm hoping that it'll inspire more young people to do exactly what you did. Fantastic. So Pamela, tell us a little bit about how long it was taking you to go ahead and get started. When did you start thinking about it, and what was your first step?
Well, actually, I started thinking about it when I was pretty young, probably 35, 40 years ago, back, even as early as when I was in high school. I thought about writing. I never did much but dabble. And so after dabbling for quite a bit, most of it with poetry throughout the years, I thought about doing something. I actually thought about writing an inspirational book. The Living in the Fire book that you see or saw on the thing before was my first real book, and it is nonfiction, and it took me about 20 years to write. I spent a lot of time not writing, and I understood much later that God used that for me, because it got a lot of me out of the book and a lot more about him in it. So sometimes you can do things very quickly, and sometimes it takes a little while. And it took me a long while to actually publish a real book. I actually did my poetry book first, and in a very short period of time, but I did it all myself. And like everyone has said before, it takes a lot of research that you've got to find out where you can do things. But fortunately, there are a lot of resources out there on the internet that you can just kind of grab onto and find out how you want to go, what you want to do. But I took much more time thinking about it than I actually did writing, and now I have a real passion for writing.
Oh, that's fantastic, Pamela. And, and that's inspiring as in itself, because I know that we have seniors who are, coming and joining in this webinar, and they've said, I thought about writing, 20, 30 years ago. And, I started writing, and taking notes and whatnot. And I think that is important, because it's never too late. It's never too late to follow your dreams. So thank you so much, Pamela. So Tracy, same question for you. How long were you thinking about it, and what was your first step?
So I actually started really, really young, writing just kind of rhyming poetry. And over time, I just collected all kinds of different, I guess what came to be short stories that would be fun if they had pictures with them. And a friend of mine said, maybe you should try to find an illustrator. And that kind of started my first research into what it would take to create a picture book. But it always started as just a sincere passion for writing that, evolved over time.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. And that's a great word, passion. I think that to be a writer, you have to have a passion for what you're writing about, right? Yes, all of the authors are saying yes. Great. So we're going to go ahead and head into our second round of questions. And I did see your question here, Juan, and I will go ahead and work that into the end. Juan wants to know who inspired each one of you. So we'll save that question for the end, okay? Second round of questions here. Do you have a writing system or ritual that you do to prepare yourself for writing? And we're going to follow the same order. So Chloe, if you want to take your mic off and then answer that question. What is your writing system or ritual that you have, and how do you prepare yourself for writing?
My system is to read a book and then go to write for ideas to expand my book and to help me to maybe get more ideas in my head so I could write more than maybe I would have if I didn't read before.
Okay, so with like how they call brainstorming, so you do a little bit of brainstorming before you actually sit down and write. I think she froze up here. That's okay. Did you get that question?
This is one of the books I read.
Oh, I see. So, okay. So you're talking about actually reading other books, and then that gives you ideas to put into your book.
So, yes.
Okay, great. So Daniel, same question to you. What is your ritual or system that you do?
My hierarchy of needs includes snacks, cupcakes, a lot of carbs, hugs when they were allowed. We can't do hugs right now. But, you know, so I am a procrastinator. I will find any excuse to stop writing and go like, ooh, cookies or whatever. So I like what Liz said earlier about, you know, sometimes just changing your setting. So if you're writing a fictional story and your story is not really working, maybe change the setting because people act differently in a different setting, right? So I like what Liz said earlier, you know, as a writer, it's good to go outdoors, take a little walk, maybe with a camera, with binoculars, just enjoy nature, and something, you know, usually will come to you. So I don't call it, writers, we don't call it procrastinating, okay? We call it incubation period. So let the idea percolate for a little while. And so sometimes it's important to walk away. I walk away for carbs, but there's, so sometimes it's changing things up, and then you come back to the story, and now the character wants to say something, or now the poem wants to be written. So I don't keep a journal. Sometimes the poem wants to be written by hand. Sometimes the poem wants to be typed, you know, and it just kind of varies, but I do edit a lot. That is part of my ritual, is I edit, right to the point of right before publication. So that is very important. Sometimes I've written things that when I love one of my pieces or a sentence so much, I'll reread it 100 times. And I'll be like, oh, sometimes I'll Google it, like, did I hear that in a movie somewhere? Like, oh, I made that up. Okay, it doesn't exist, because I need to verify as a poet that I didn't see that in some bumper sticker. So I get inspired by artwork. I get inspired by things around me and stuff like that. So sometimes talking to other poets is part of my ritual too, like, what are you writing about? And sometimes that distraction of getting something else to write about, then I'm ready to kind of come back to my original piece.
Perfect. And that's a great point, Daniel, is, you know, there's, you're an example of, you know, there's no right or wrong way to write. It just kind of comes and it flows from you. And, you know, cookies are always a good excuse to be inspired. So Caitlyn, that we have you next. What is your ritual or your system for writing?
It would be a beautiful thing to just say, oh, I'm an outliner and I have everything nice and neat and it's perfect, but that's not how it works. I am very much an outliner. I need to have things in a list, and it could make absolutely no sense. Like, this is going to be the exposition and the climax is over here and the ending's over here. What happens in the middle? I have no idea, and I fill it in along the way as it progresses. But I think my main system would be something that I found out that it is an actual thing, and the internet calls it a brain dump, where on a document, whatever comes, it doesn't matter if it's a dialogue that I think of it and it's, hey, that'd be a good line. I have no idea where, but let's write it down. And character profiles and different scenes. This should take place in New York. I don't know when or where, but New York. And so mine is a very blocked, structured, organized chaos of an outline that it eventually grows into something that's actually formal. And I can go back and say, okay, this is going to happen, this detail, blah, blah, blah. So I very much do keep everything all organized as an outline, but in little text boxes surrounding the outline is all of the little details that help make it come together.
Perfect. Well, that's wonderful. I do brain dumps for my business, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And, you know, that's how it kind of comes together. Sometimes you get different pieces of the puzzle, right? And as the author, you get to dictate on how they come together. So that's awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Caitlyn. And so, Pamela, what is your ritual or system for writing?
Actually, I like to have a specific place. And I come into my office and I sit at my desk, and that's when I write. I know there are a lot of people that do things a lot differently. Some people, like Daniel said, go out into nature and they're able to write and understand things better. As a nonfiction writer, it's a little different from writing fiction, because I think fiction is more structured. And like Caitlyn says, you have to have lists and you've got to know this character and that character and what you're doing. But I write a lot more from inspiration and things that I hear. So understand.
Oh, you froze there, Pamela. Can you repeat that for us there? Oh, we might have a little glitch there. We'll come back to Pamela in just a second. Tracy, if you want to take your mic off, and we'll go ahead and jump over. I think Pamela might be having a glitch.
Sure. Yeah, so a lot of my books come to me in dream form. So I've really dissected why this is and why this happens. And I really think it's because my mind is quiet in that time. Hello. And it allows for ideas to come in. So when I try to get myself in a good space for inspiration, I might go into nature and find that calm place. I might go, when I lived in Florida, it was go by the beach. So anywhere where I can just kind of find some stillness. I do meditate in the morning, and that kind of allows for some ideas to just kind of flow in. And I usually, I guess before writing, I always try to get as far away from my cell phone as possible, just get into my own little quiet place, put on some music. And depending on what I'm writing, it might be like the soundtrack to some fairy tale movie. It might be the soundtrack to, whatever, to get me in that mood of creation. But yeah, my places for inspiration kind of vary.
Well, that's great. So you kind of just, do it as it comes, right? Whatever inspires you. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tracy. Okay, perfect. So our next question, and I think this has been answered a couple of times, but maybe if you can be more specific with some resources. The question is, what research, if any, did you do to write your book and publish it? So maybe if you can give specifically some resources that our fellow aspiring authors can go ahead and check out. So Chloe, we'll go ahead and start with you. What resources did you take a look at and research before publishing?
Books, all different types of books, different authors maybe, and that's all for ideas to expand my series and the individual books. So it could basically just keep going so it doesn't stop without any information. You're muted.
Thank you. So you enjoy basically getting inspired by other works, and that's kind of how you keep your mind and your imagination going.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll jump over to Daniel. same question for you. What are some resources that you researched before publishing?
Well, I would pick up magazines here and there, like at the bookstore, about writing, poets and writers, that sort of thing. And I looked at contests, and I look at just different ads that they had about like need help, with this and that. And it's really kind of sad that there's a lot of people out there trying to take your money with some contests that are not legit, or pay me, Liz mentioned about a $500, $750 budget. I mean, there's people that are be like, oh, pay us, $3,000 and we'll give you 5 books and you'll never hear from us again or whatever. So I one of the resources is called Writer's Market. It's about, I don't know, 300 pages or so. It's about $30, maybe about $40, Writer's Market, and it's every year. So the 2020 Writer's Market. Now, I would recommend going to the library. Hopefully your public library has, even if it's 1 or 2 years old, just to kind of get an idea. And it lists agents, it lists magazines, it lists, say you want to write a novel. Well, maybe publishers aren't ready for you because they don't know you. So the Writer's Market will have like resources like send us 1 chapter, or how to send a chapter and stuff like that. Back in the old days, they would throw away your the mail. They would get your manuscript in the mail, and if everything wasn't perfect, stapled or formatted, they would just throw it away. They would never read it. Now a lot of people have gone online, but still formatting is still important. You have to respect, you have to research, what does this publisher want? They want a certain heading. If they say 10 pages of 1 chapter, they don't want 12 pages. They just want the 10 pages. So Writer's Market is a good source. And again, it's pretty costly, but you can go to the public library, maybe get an old copy just to kind of get an idea. That was a really helpful one.
Oh, that's a great resource. And that's a good idea about going to the library and getting some of those free resources. So great. Thank you, Daniel. Pamela, it looks like you're back with us now. If you want to take your mute off there. And that's okay. No problem. I know it's virtual. We're all getting new to this, right? So the question, Pamela, is what research, if any, did you do to write your book and publish it? And if you can maybe share a specific resource that you used.
I'd be glad to. One of the books that I published was with a traditional publisher called Arcadia Press. And we had to do a lot of research on that one. Spent a lot of time in the library looking at old newspapers and magazines because it covered about 150 years worth of history, and that we wrote about different people, but we had to know the history of our Grand Prairie. We had to know about the people. We had to know what happened. So I spent a lot of time in the library. I spent a lot of time going through archive files where people have just kept stuff in the library throughout the years. So sometimes research is one of the main things that you have to have for any book. And like Daniel said, if you have a traditional publisher, they want specific things and they have an outline, they have things that you have to do. So that's what we did. But we spent a lot of time just researching in books, mostly the library. We spent a lot of time. Very little of it was done online, but we did some interviews and those sorts of things. But research is really important in any book that you write.
That's great. Thank you so much, Pamela. And, I think you brought up something important, is actually interviewing people. And I know that all of our panelists here in different capacities have been speakers at some point. And I know Liz mentioned having a mentor. And so, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There's mentors all around us if we just ask. So thank you so much, Pamela, for that advice. Caitlyn, you're up next. And so if you can share with us some resources that you actually researched.
In terms of actually writing the book, I think the largest part of research came from looking basically on Google for the locations. My book takes place in several different places all over the world, and I've never been outside of Texas. And I really wanted to have it. I really wanted to have every single location like down and perfect. So it was a lot of going to their actual country websites and looking at landscapes and okay, I'm writing about this in August. What's the weather like in August over there? What's the time at 7 in the morning? All sorts of different things. What's the culture? What language do they speak? What's considered normal? It was a lot of research on actual locations, the culture and weather and time and things like that. And I've never been to any of the places that are listed in the book, but I feel like that was actually one of the most fun parts. Writing, of course, is so much fun, but being able to see it like virtually and then kind of put it together in your head and then get it down on the written word, it was just really, really amazing. And in terms of publishing, it was a lot of research. You can sit down and go through all of the different routes and you're not going to learn everything in one night. That was one of the sad truths that my family and I discovered. And you're always constantly learning. You're always constantly finding new resources. And when it gets down to it, it's just weighing the pros and cons of, is traditional publishing for me or is self-publishing for me? And doing as much research. If you think this is the route, think again, look it over again, because it's a very, very, very big deal deciding how your book is going to be brought to life. So for any prospective writers who think, oh, self-publishing sounds nice, great, but make sure you keep looking into it and learning more as much as you can, because there's always more little things to learn.
That's great advice, Caitlyn. You know, keep learning. You're always evolving, always learning, always getting better, right? So that's awesome. Tracy, so what is your tips for us as far as research and any specific place we might be able to go?
Yeah, so with mine, it's a little bit different because I publish mainly picture books. So I get a lot of my information from the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators website. There's an entire platform there. Right now they're doing free online courses, which they normally never do. So you can actually subscribe and you can have these live interactions, kind of like this, with different people who have been New York Times bestsellers, different picture book authors from all over the world. So people are really helpful. And again, there's different people from self-publishing avenues versus traditional in that mix. So you can ask a lot of questions and get feedback on, you know, how to format the pictures, how to format the style, what is selling in stores. I don't really write for what sells. I just write what I feel and what the story is for me. But a lot of people kind of follow the trends and try to figure out what sells. But yeah, there's a ton of information there. And then as far as writing the stories, I do a lot of research on, so for example, one book I'm about to put out is about Olympic athlete Betty Robinson. So she was the first female athlete to win a medal for the United States in track and field. And so I've been working with her family, her kids and her grandkids, to kind of come up with information about her life and all the key parts and then turn it into a picture book. So it's been a really cool process of highlighting her life achievements and then turning it into illustrations with words.
Oh, how neat. Okay. So going back to, you know, the interview process and, you know, learning and getting resources, that's fantastic. So, you know, thank you so much, Tracy. So one of the common themes I think from all of our authors is other books, you know, and so I'm going to do a shameless plug for all of our authors and encourage you all to buy one of their books, you know, because we should be able to support our fellow authors, especially if we're thinking about writing, right? I'm not an author yet, and so I'm kind of in that position of trying to gather the information and do some research. So I encourage you all to go ahead and visit iConnect Texas on Facebook, and you'll see the link to all of our authors and where to buy their books. Alrighty, so we're getting close to wrapping up here. We have one more question for all of our panelists, and I'll go ahead and incorporate the question from Juan here. So the question that we have is there any other advice that you can share with our inspiring authors? So we're kind of leaving it open-ended question. And then once you answer that question, if you can name somebody who's actually inspired you, maybe an author or a mentor who's actually inspired you to write. And so we'll go ahead and start with you, Chloe.
Oh, my advice is to never stop dreaming, and you could do everything at any age. What inspires author that inspired me was J.K. Rowling. She's the author of Harry Potter. She inspired me because my second grade teacher told me she wrote a book at 4 years old. So I read a book on J.K. Rowling. It was true. I've read about 500 books. The book I wrote was for children in the hospital. My advice for kids my age is to never stop reading. Every day. Read every day. Keep a journal. Ask lots of questions and don't give up. Kids my age always think they have to be perfect. No one is perfect. Make mistakes. It's okay.
Oh, you're so adorable. I love you. We're all giving you a virtual high five. We love that, Chloe. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll move on to Daniel. What is your final advice for us, and who inspired you?
Some of my final advice. I just love that, Chloe. You're inspiring all of us. I appreciate you. Writers are readers first. We fell in love with reading once upon a time, or storytelling and that sort of thing. So we're listeners, we're observers, we're readers, and so some of my favorite authors or poets are Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou, and Nora Ephron. She passed away a few years ago. She's a Hollywood producer and screenwriter, Nora Ephron, and she said, a lot of young people go to Hollywood, like they're 20 something, and they have this one awesome movie script from their whole life. They had their whole life to write it. But then the second, third movie, like they have nothing else because they haven't lived, they haven't experienced. So one of my favorite jobs was being a newspaper reporter. So like Pam mentioned, there's a lot of research in nonfiction stories, So it helped me to kind of, again, be the listener, be an observer. And so I have some mentors in the newspaper writing business too. But Maya Angelou, the poet, Langston Hughes are some of my favorites. And the other piece of advice, the last piece of advice I would ask is just why? Why are you doing this? So, like Tracy mentioned, it's not because of what's trending. It's just what story she needs to tell, which is from your heart that you need to get out. So why are you doing this? Is it because it's a family story and you want your family to have it, to maybe book a family recipes or stories, or is it to become a bestseller? And you got to research that and how to work that. So find out your why, and that's going to help you market your book to at least pay for your gas, if not to become a millionaire. So good luck and good luck with all your writing, y'all.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That's great advice. I love that. All right. So Pamela, what is your last bit of advice here for our aspiring authors, and who inspired you?
Well, I have to say that the person that inspired me was not somebody I've read. It's not anything else. After years of not writing, I had a friend that told me, finish your book. It was as simple as that. And I looked to her to give me some feedback and different things. So it can be something as simple as someone or it can be a great author, as some of y'all have noted. The last piece of advice that I really have for people is to think about marketing long before you finish a book. You may want to start even before your first word is written. You may have an idea of what you want to do. You may have an idea of when you want to get it published, but you have to think about who you're going to sell to and all those types of things. So you want to start thinking about marketing early. Nobody told me I had to be a marketer before I wrote a book. So it's something that you want to think about, but just do it.
That's great advice. And it looks like Daniel said, yep, me too. He raised his hand there. So, that's one of the things that I like to do is, help support authors in different ways, as far as my marketing background and things like that. So thank you, Pamela, for that. That's great advice, because at the end of the day, you need to let people know that you've written that book, right? And so it doesn't have to necessarily be your driving factor, but it should at least be something that you're thinking about. So great advice, Pamela. All right, Caitlyn, you're up next. What is your final words of wisdom here, and who inspired you?
In complete and total honesty, Chloe took the words right out of my mouth. The big, just go for it. Absolutely. Don't give up. And when I do school presentations, that's the mantra that we always chant. We scream at the top of our lungs, just don't stop dreaming. And I feel that that message echoes across all age levels, not just elementary school, middle school, high school, teenage, college, adult, senior, everybody. Just a lot of times we, face the real world and we start getting into that mindset of, well, can I really do this? A lot of people say it's hard. Is my story worth it? I don't. And I feel like that first step is it's a mind game. It's a kind of a battle with yourself of realizing, okay, are you going to stay, with it and keep it in your heart and not share it because of fear? Or are you going to realize that you owe this to your story just as much as you owe it to yourself? If this is something that you really made and cultivated and cherished and care about, absolutely, it deserves to be out in the world. And so the first step would be just taking a deep breath and going for it. Never give up. Don't stop dreaming. And one person who inspired me, an author, growing up, I would always read his books. Carl Hiaasen. He wrote books, award-winning books like Hoot, Scat, Chomp. I Know Hoot turned into a movie. And what he does is he always writes about Florida, so he writes about what he knows. But he would always take two completely different stories and make them something beautiful and amazing. Like Hoot won an award, and it's about endangered owls, a pancake house, and a boy who ran away from military school. But he brings it together, and it's beautiful, and you cry, and you're flipping the page. And so reading his books growing up and seeing how he took these completely different things and made it into something cohesive and beautiful, that really inspired me to say, if I have my story, I can get it out there, I can keep going.
I love that, Caitlyn. That's really awesome. Your inspiration and, those words of wisdom, just keep going. And you're absolutely right. If it's put in your heart to write that story, write that book, then it could inspire somebody else. So why keep it to yourself? I love that. All right, Tracy, you're up next. What is your words of wisdom?
So when I do a lot of school visits, I always show a slide towards the end of my presentation about rejection, and kids are always like, what? And I have some different statistics on the screen about famous authors, J.K. Rowling, the author of The Wizard of Oz, and some other really famous, like Moby Dick. Some of these stories almost didn't get published. It's crazy to me, because, if they would have just stopped, their life purpose wouldn't have happened. So my advice is just to always follow through and just keep going, and don't be scared of rejection, and don't be fearful about any kind of, I guess, with social media today, people can comment on things and say like, oh, I didn't like this or whatever, but not everyone's gonna like your work, and that's okay. But just stay true to who you are, and don't be scared, and do what is in your heart. And then someone who's inspired me, I have a really good friend of mine who's also an author, and I found her through a podcast because I heard somebody talking about her, that her books come to her in dreams, and I went, who's this person? And I thought, that might be too. And so I connected with her on Facebook, and so her and I have been friends now for years, and she's also a children's author, and so we kind of bounce ideas off of each other and talk about the process and helpful tips or webinars or book events and stuff that we can both attend. And it's been really great to find like almost a peer / mentor in this space. So she's a great person to know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tracy. That's some great advice there. And you're absolutely right. I think Caitlyn also mentioned, conquering that fear, because I would venture to say that that is probably the one thing that hinders most people, is that fear of rejection, that fear of, what will they say? Is it good enough, etc. So great advice. I want to come back to Liz really quick, because she's still with us here. And Liz, is there any other, advice that you can give? Just, your last words of wisdom here. And then also we'd like to know who inspires you.
Great. Well, one thing that I do is the people inspire me, because my books are based off of real life people's stories. And like Oprah Winfrey said, she said, you heal by sharing your stories with others. And since I've been writing the books and hearing other people's stories, and some of the people that have chapters in my book come to my book signings and sign their chapter in the book. And so the people inspire me, because we want to get word out. And now what I do is when I interview people to see if I want them to have a part in my book, they have had to have healed from their prior experiences, whatever they have gone through in life, because my books are on overcoming. And so I want to make sure that when I'm presenting in my book something, it's going to end on a positive note in each chapter of my book. And just like the other said, Tracy, Caitlyn, is don't worry about if people are going to like your book, if they're going to like you. You can have the juiciest, ripest peach, but not everyone's going to like peaches. So, and then on my last end of the note is God is my pilot.
Ooh. Amen to that. That's great, Liz. So we are going to go ahead and wrap it up, because we're just over an hour here on our webinar. And, you know, we did have several people joining us. So I want to thank all of those who are joining us. And I'm just going to give a quick shout out to the folks that are still on here. Ana Cavazos, Glenda Galvan Garcia, Juan Rodriguez, Liz Aragon, and Teresa Roberts. Thank you guys for joining us on the webinar and staying with us through the whole time. Daniel is giving you guys the heart, and we're giving you a virtual round of applause. All of our speakers and panelists, thank you guys so much. We will be posting this on Facebook with the link on the replay. Please share it with anybody that you know who is thinking about writing a book, young, old, you know, Gen Xers, boomers, all of us have an opportunity to share our story. And so we just encourage you to reach out. You know, all of our panelists here are very giving and loving people. And we just encourage you to connect with them, like their pages, share about them. And other than that, we will see you next time at our next workshop for iConnect Texas. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.